Hey, everybody. This Hangout on Air is live. It is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night. Cecil Lammey, Sigmund Bloom, and Matt Waldman this evening, ready to talk some football with you. And Bloom, you're back from assignment. Always good to see you, brother.
Yeah, it's good to be back. And this is a fun time for us to settle in. We can think about depth charts now. The moves are creeping to just a crawl. We're waiting on Des Bryant, but really, we may see a few third wave free agents. We can start to wrap our mind around what these teams are going to be looking at when training camp opens and trickle in some OTA and minicamp news.
Yeah, with rookie minicamps wrapped up, Matt, it's all now on to the next phase, which is OTAs, which I know start up in just a few days. Broncos are actually in 5 days, so I'll be out at Dove Valley again. But Matt, it's getting towards crunch time. There's a little bit of a lull, but then it'll be back to action and back to news.
Sure, and there's a lot that's unsettled right now, so it's going to be fun for a lot of teams, for fantasy owners to try and pick out some of these depth charts and especially these running back situations. There's a lot of committees that, or a lot of potential situations, say like Green Bay, when you look at them, or Cleveland, and you wonder about who's really going to have that lead role. And that's something that's going to be settled, fairly soon. Are they, is Tariq Cohen, who's getting love in Bears camp, going to actually, is that more of just the annual, we want to get the gadget guy more opportunities, or is there actual, fire with that smoke?
Yeah, and let's start there, Bloom, because Matt Nagy, one of the most creative minds in all of football. And if you look at our newswire at footballguys.com, you'll see the report that Matt is referencing where coach is excited about Tariq Cohen. Could he be used in ways like Tyreek Hill, which obviously fantasy owners know how much that means for them. Tariq the Freak, certainly explosive and electric, but is it Tyreek Hill like or light in Chicago with Nagy running the show?
I think that we're going to see a lot more of him. And I believe that we can all go back to week 1 last year, and he was used copiously and on most of his touches impressed. On most of his touches would make someone miss or show acceleration or quickness that showed he fit in on Sundays. And then week to week, John Fox, the game plan, duello gains, some weeks he would touch the ball 5 times. And then some weeks, occasionally, he would be back in that semi-central role that he was in week 1. And going back, and I'm working on something right now where I'm stripping the quarterback rushing numbers, and I'm just looking at running games strictly from the point of view of running backs. And an interesting thing that happens is that quarterback stats often inflate running games to look like they have more volume or more efficiency than they really do. And Kansas City last year only ran the ball only gave the ball to running back 324 times. That's was 29th in the league. Only Green Bay, Seattle, and Cleveland had fewer running back handoffs. So I don't think that Jordan Howard, I mean, if Kansas City only ran the ball 324 times with a running back, then Jordan Howard probably isn't going to carry the ball more than 280 or 300 times. We're not going to see these 35 carry games, I don't think. And I think that I won't be shocked to see Cohen play 40 or 45% of the snaps. He offers more than Howard does. I would expect that Cohen could approach 60, 70 catches this year and be used in a way where he's going to be more efficient with help from Trey Burton, Adam Shaheen, of course, Allen Robinson, Taylor Gabriel, and it's going to become a much more efficient offense. So I see Terry Cohen in early MFL 10 best ball drafts, 7th, 8th round. And I think that's a terrific proposition because they're going to set him up for success.
How does Tariq Cohen set up Mitchell Trubisky for more success this year, Matt?
I think that if Mitchell Trubisky adjusts well to his second system in 2 years and his second set of starting receivers in 2 years, and that all of this change doesn't force a slow acclimation process, then I agree with Bloom. I think that what you can see here is more use of Cohen in the way of that Atlanta game where he was actually running deep routes and more than just arrow routes or circle routes or in the screen game. And if they diversify his usage or put him in a position where even, let's say they kind of Julian Edelman him and move him around the formation to dictate where the easy matchup is for every player in the alignment, then he could be a really central player for Trubisky to kind of key off. When he motions, Cohen, does that mean, okay, now I see the single coverage for Allen Robinson, or now this creates a, kind of a 2 receiver coverage bind for a defensive back with the 2 receivers on the left that Cohen motioned away from? Does it open Cohen up for, a one-on-one with a linebacker or a safety? So he could easily be that kind of key card type of player that opens up the locks to that defense. But at the same time, if there's a lot of unfamiliarity, if the verbiage is a little more difficult with Nagy's offense, if the changeover is a little too great for Trubisky, and I don't anticipate that to a degree, but I'm still kind of in a little bit of wait and see mode, at least in training camp, to see kind of progress reports about how Trubisky's doing. If that is an issue, then you kind of think, is he going to have confidence in throwing downfield to a little back? Is he going to be willing to make some of those vertical downfield throws or even intermediate plays to him, and make him a go-to guy like that? I think most quarterbacks, and a quarterback like Trubisky, who's worked with guys like Ryan Switzer, who was pretty small, and
right.
A player like Austin Prohl, that's probably not going to be a problem at all. But at the same time, there's a difference between throwing a wide open post route and then having the confidence to say, you know what, maybe Tariq Cohen can give us a little Steve Smith action and suddenly become one of our primary playmakers. And I think that Cohen has some of that ability in him. I'm just skeptical that most quarterbacks are willing to tap into that. And I would say Trubisky, I would be skeptical. I think that's where the limit is for him. I think right now you're looking at him as a Darren Sproles type of player, who of course was number 8 in the NFL all-time all-purpose yards, as of last year. So I think Cohen has a lot of upside. It just depends on how imaginatively they use him, and whether Trubisky can hang in there. And I'd say that means he's probably a good bet as a running back too in PPR leagues this year.
I'm going to just interject really quickly. You mentioned Ryan Switzer, and Trubisky made a lot of great downfield plays with Switzer, so I think he's used to diminutive deep threat. But also Chase Daniels there as the backup quarterback, and Chase Daniels spent 4 years in the Reed, Peterson, Nagy umbrella between the Eagles and Chiefs. So hopefully if Trubisky, it's almost like having another coach on the staff that will ease the transition. And when they did in the Detroit game last year, they did a lot of ball handling, a lot of fakes, a lot of things that forced Trubisky to be thinking on his feet. And he looked really comfortable, and I didn't understand why they didn't go back to that.
And man alive, Ryan Switzer has a small catch radius. Matt and I, we saw that firsthand, because that first day of practice at the Senior Bowl last year, he was catching everything. Wow, look at this guy. And then the next couple of days, it was wow, look, you better have it right on the money, or else he's not going to catch it because of the little tiny arms. Anyway, Bloom, I've been writing a lot about the Baltimore Ravens. And yes, as a Steelers fan, it makes me uncomfortable, but still, usually it's with all the rookies signing their contracts, I've been writing a lot about Mandrew, right? Mark Andrews, right? But there's a story coming across the Football Guys Newswire that suggests that Baltimore is committed to Alex Collins. Their decision not to select a running back in the 2018 NFL draft is a sign they are comfortable with Alex Collins as their starter. That's from Jamison Hensley from ESPN. Alex Collins. I actually talked to David Williams about Alex Collins last week at rookie minicamp. Are they committed? Are they comfortable? And should fantasy owners be comfortable with Alex Collins in 2018?
I don't know that they're truly committed in the way they were last year. And it's because of a name that I know will make Matt Waldman light up a little bit, Kenneth Dixon. Kenneth Dixon will be back. And I think if we assume rational coaching and we assume touches in the backfield to be distributed to talent, ability, I think that Kenneth Dixon should be a big part of this backfield, maybe not quite as big as Alex Collins was. And Alex Collins, as they said in Seattle, became a lot better receiver, but he's not as good of a receiver out of the backfield as Kenneth Dixon, and not as good of a backfield receiver as Buck Allen. So I think that this backfield should, and one of the notes that Matt hit on at the top of the show, seeing these backfields sort themselves out, it seems to me with the three different skill sets and strengths that these running backs offer, I do see Alex Collins leading the team in carries. I do see Alex Collins, when they get a lead, being the running back that they use with that tremendous initial burst to wear down defenses, not with his power, but with how much energy he has. But Kenneth Dixon is the guy who's totally forgotten right now. And I get it. He had the suspension. And why can you serve a suspension when you're on IR? That doesn't seem to make any sense to me. But he did. And he was on IR. And now he's going to be back. And we forget that they were really excited to work him in his rookie year. He got hurt. So maybe I'm bearing the lead here, is that he's been hurt 2 years in a row. But I do think that if he's healthy, he will show out and seize a larger part of this backfield. And if I can take Collins in the 5th or Kenneth Dixon with one of my last picks, I'm going to take Kenneth Dixon.
Matt, let's discuss this and Dixon specifically because, hurt last couple of years. It means he's due. It means he's due to be healthy. And with that talent as a receiver out of the backfield, I agree with Bloom that it's never really seemed like they're fully committed to Alex Collins. Whether they should be or not, that's another discussion. But that's just the way the optics seem from the outside looking in. It's like, we like him, but he's, he wasn't ours. It wasn't our pick. Dixon was their pick. And Dixon is a guy that they really like still.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a terrific talent, and and he certainly flashed that his rookie year, and then it just kind of all fell apart due to the suspension and due to the injury. So from that perspective, I can understand how that he may get that opportunity back. I will say though, I'm excited about Alex Collins. I actually like what I saw on tape so much that if I were the Ravens, or thinking about the way that a lot of football teams act with their players. I mean, look at the Broncos with C.J. Anderson. He had 2 years where he couldn't stay healthy the full season, and they were like, whatever, we'll give him an extension, I guess. He's gonna, he kind of out-negotiated us, I guess. We'll keep him around. We'll draft some more players behind him, I guess. He was never a guy they were totally sold on. And I look at, I can see that happening with Kenneth Dixon in this situation. And when I watch Collins, I mean, certainly he wasn't as known of a receiver in Seattle or in Baltimore, but from the tape I saw at Arkansas, when he was targeted, he made as impressive catches as anybody's I've seen on the field. And he's got very good hands and the ability to track the ball. He can track the ball downfield and in tight coverage. It's just a matter, I think, of getting familiar with the passing game and how Baltimore works that and your linemen around you, because you have to filter out of the backfield and understand what their blocking assignments are and how you work through that. And when you're brought in at the beginning of the season because you're cut at the end of August, you're not going to get a lot of that time to get that fluid in the short passing game as a receiver. So I think you're going to see a better version of Alex Collins as a receiver for the Ravens. And on top of that, they're getting Marshall Yanda back. I mean, he might be the best run blocking guard in football, and they didn't have him at all last year. So to me, it's one of those situations where I don't know how it's going to shake out yet. And I don't think any of us really do, which makes us fun because this is going to be a whole hour of us probably disagreeing on either side of pretty much every issue right now. But I look at Alex Collins as a top 15 back right now because the Ravens need a guy that they feel like that they can trust. And Dixon hasn't shown he can stay healthy. He already had the PED thing, which is not teams don't look at that and go, oh, that's okay. They look at that and, whether they know one thing or the other is an unwritten rule. I'm sure the unwritten rule is don't be stupid with how you handle.
Don't get caught.
Issues. Don't get caught. If you're going to be the most cynical about that. And he did. And then on top of that, you look at what Collins was able to do. And I just think that this team may just say, we can rely on him and that will work out. That will work out rather well for us. And if Dixon has more to prove because now the privilege has changed, instead of Dixon being the early round or mid round, the 4th round privileged guy who was our existing drafted guy, they can look at Collins and say, well, he's the incumbent now, and he's the guy that proved that he can do it. And heck, he came in early in the year and we didn't have Yanda, and look how well he did. There's no excuses with Collins. We're making excuses for Dixon. Let's see if Dixon can do it without excuses now. And that means in camp, you could be in a situation where now when Collins makes a mistake here and there, they're going to go, whatever, we know what he can do. Whereas if Dixon makes mistakes right now, it sets him even lower. So I'm kind of leaning more towards Collins until Dixon proves it, as much as I like Dixon's talent.
Bloom, you'll probably know this, and Matt, you'll probably know it as well. Who sang Ball of Confusion originally? Because I know Anthrax redid
Temptations?
Was it that? Is that right?
Or the Four Tops?
We'll let the Google machine look. But Ball of Confusion was redone by Anthrax. That's how I know the song. Not no Four Tops on the iPod. Anyway, the reason I bring that up, Bloom, who was it?
It was the Temptations.
Ah, beautiful. Wonderful. It's the universe, right? The reason I bring up Ball of Confusion, because that seems to be the state of multiple running back positions for fantasy owners out there across the league. When looking at projections, and Bloom, I'd love to get in a conversation tonight about the difficulty of projecting players for the NFL and that process that you've learned and skillfully crafted over the years. Because I see all sorts of projections for the Denver Broncos. I just wrote the team reports for the Denver Broncos, and I wanted to put Royce Freeman as the starter. I so wanted to, but as we sit today, it has to be Devontae Booker. But then you look at projections, and very talented people doing projections out there. But if you see projections out there, you'll say, oh, well, Devontae Freeman's the guy. All right, we assume that will be the case. But I think it is a ball of confusion. I got a list of other backfields that we're going to get to tonight. But Bloom, let's discuss the difficulty in projecting and why this year seems to be less clear.
Well, and just one last footnote on the Baltimore backfield, and really the answer might be both, because another thing from the numbers I'm putting together on backfields, we'll do a series of articles. Baltimore was actually 4th in the league, tied with Cleveland, in running back targets and running back receptions, over 109 running back receptions last year. And that was with Danny Woodhead banged up for a good part of the year. And the top 3 receivers are all brand new receivers for Joe Flacco. So I have a feeling he'll lean on the running backs once again. And the top tight end is a rookie. So I think you're going to see a lot more running back receptions, and Dixon and Collins can both provide profit return on ADP. I think what we're seeing, Cease, is more multiple backfields. And we can go back to 10 years ago or 12, 13 years ago when if you were talking about running back by committee becoming something that's going to be more common, people would react to it like you're saying the sky is falling, but really the backs that hold down a backfield on their own are rare. And because of that, we're seeing running back take back over the first round of redrafts, or at least the top half of the first round. We're seeing running back take back over rookie drafts. I think in the rookie drafts we've been doing, running backs are 7 of the first 8 picks or 6 of the first 7 picks, because just the promise of a running back who can have 50 or 60% of his team's touches is now something, a force to be reckoned with in fantasy. So it makes it much, much more difficult to project these season-long numbers. And as you said, Cecil, a lot of people doing very talented work out there. But when you nail it down to one data point, you're hiding the real complexity and range of outcomes. Because say, Devontae Booker and Royce Freeman, which you mentioned. Well, basically, it's this idea of a variable. Do you think Royce Freeman will take over the lion's share of the work ahead of Devontae Booker, or at least the carries at some point? It sure seems like, based on what we've seen from Devontae Booker and what we saw from Royce Freeman, especially with Royce Freeman's measurables showing that the arrow is pointing back up for him, that he should. Okay, well, when do you think that will happen? Week 3, week 6, week 9, week 12? And then you have to bake all of that into one number. Again, looking back at the numbers I'm putting together, Denver was actually had over 400 running back carries last year, which is very high. And they also had 87 receptions, middle of the pack. So that's 493 running back touches to divvy up. So are you going to say 220 for each of them and D'Angelo Henderson cleaning up, or maybe Philip Lindsay? Are you going to adjust it based on your beliefs? But you're hiding a whole range of outcomes here where Devontae Booker gets it. Royce Freeman in his first game touches the ball 10 times and runs for 120 yards, and they go back to the drawing board. And Cease, I know a variable that you're very familiar with is the assumption of rational coaching, or maybe in
Right.
this case, emotional coaching, or not being willing to back off of a commitment. And that's something that we can only guess at. And sometimes we don't learn until after the fact. Oh, they're not going to go away from DeMarco Murray. They're not going to go away from, maybe this year it's Devontae Booker, even though Devontae Booker is putting up 20 carries for 60 yards every week. So it's very difficult to capture all of these questions and all of these variables with one data point.
Well, the Royce Freeman buzz is legit for everyone out there. I say he wins the job outright in training camp. I've talked to Vance Joseph about Booker. Just from my impression, he seems less in love. He was telling friends last year, like, Booker's sneaky good. And he also revealed that had Booker not been hurt with a wrist injury before training camp, that he was going to be in the mix for the lead back. Again, they weren't really, this staff didn't really love CJ Anderson. As painful as that is to admit. Well, they wanted Booker to be the guy. He's not. And here's the other thing. There are going to be more Kubiak fingerprints than ever before. That's zone blocking, Matt. And as we know with Devontae Booker, he's a power gap guy. Give him a lane and he can do it. But if you give him a choice of bend, bang, or bounce, his brain freezes. It fries. And he's not capable or effective of running in his own system. That's all you do at Oregon is run in space and make decisions and cut back or bend, bang, bounce, whatever. I just love saying bang. So, Matt, let's discuss this situation. And again, talk about the difficulty in projecting a lot of these situations across the league.
Yeah, I mean, it really is difficult in that fashion because part of that, too, is as you let in with emotional coaching, a lot of that is politics. And it's not even intentional politics. Some of it is just, as Ryan Riddle has written about, and what I've been talking about a lot this time of year, which is that you have a privilege of being a early round draft pick because teams invested a lot of money in you. And what happens is that when you are picked early, it's not all about talent. It's often about how low risk you are at that pick to be paid that amount of money. That's just, so, maybe the scouts would have rated a guy a first round pick or two guys first round picks in terms of talent. But the front office is going to look at that and go, well, only one of them has early round resumes. And there's a difference, character, injury rates, whether they have the prototypical speed, whether they have, they check all the boxes at the combine, all those types of things. So when you get onto the practice field in training camp and you're a first round pick versus, say, a 7th round pick, well, you're going to get more reps because they've already invested a lot more money in you and they want to see a return. And that's an intentional thing. But the unintentional problem that occurs with that is that because you're going to get more reps, you're also going to get more opportunities to screw up. And the coach and the GM who's out there, who's looking at you, is going to go, that's okay. He's going to get it. He'll figure it out. Whereas the guy who is the 7th round guy is seen as a slappy who is going to be, get like maybe a third of the reps in a day, if that many. And he makes one mistake out of that in a week. And they look at him and go, he can't play. That's why we drafted him in the 7th round, and that's the kind of thing that got Joique Bell bounced around or, guys like that. So you look at this scenario and you see Devontae Booker being an early round pick, and there's, there's still hope out there for him. And that's what you're seeing as the last embers of that hope. But I agree with you, Cecil. When I look at the situation, he's a guy that I think a lot of people, when they evaluate him, were like, look how decisive he is running through here. And he's just got such great vision. And he always seems to just like squeeze through that crease. It's because, well, he's quick and he's got NFL quickness in a league that doesn't have NFL players in it at every position on the field. That's what a player with NFL quickness looks like. Devin Coleman looked like that, early in his career. CJ Spiller looked like that early in his career. But if you don't have the feet and the vision to actually, run the blocking schemes the way that you do, you're going to struggle a little bit more in certain situations to various degrees. And all three of those players that I just mentioned did that. And some of them got better. Some of them never did. And when you look at, Devontae Booker, I don't think he did. And the fact that they're switching back to a zone scheme just speaks to really what Freeman does well, which is his eyes and feet are well connected in terms of processing what the blocking scheme is supposed to do, what the keys are with the defenders and how to manipulate that and react to it. And I thought that one of the most subtly strong points of Freeman's game was his footwork. And so you combine that with that burst and that size. And, you know, I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine last night, actually with Ryan Riddle the other night, and talked to him in months. And we were talking about what we both thought of him, because he still does his metrics and, you know, on these players. And he said that he kind of rated Freeman as a plus athletic version of CJ Anderson. So maybe the Broncos didn't like CJ all that much, but they drafted a guy who has a lot of the style and the positive points of what Anderson brought to the table. And I expect if anything by game three, it's going to become abundantly clear, unless Booker has dramatically improved. And I think it's much harder to become a good zone runner if you haven't been one than it is to become a good gap runner if you've already run zone.
Right. Because it's decisions, it's choices, and it's also patience. Booker has no patience. So we'll watch that situation closely. Bloom, doesn't it just seem like the moment that Dante Foreman is healthy, he's the starter? Doesn't it just seem like that? Like they're kind of gritting their teeth, like, yeah, we got Lamar Miller. But really, this backfield's all about Foreman as soon as it possibly can be.
Well, he was in the process of doing that when he ruptured his Achilles or tore his Achilles. I shouldn't say that as if those are interchangeable. Dr. Gene would not be happy with me. But I think that the fact they didn't draft anybody is a sign that internally they don't have many concerns, because I don't expect they're going to keep paying Lamar Miller $6 million a year to be a functional back. He's an adequate functional back. But in this offense, there's potential to be so much more. I want to see them line up Kiki Cutie in the backfield. He lined up in the backfield sometimes at Texas Tech. Why not? Get all that speed out there. They did get Terry Swanson, an undrafted free agent, Kareem Hunt's understudy at Toledo, and he says he learned a lot from Hunt. So they did re-sign Alfred Blue the day after the draft, so perhaps they had some running backs that if they were there at a certain point in the draft, they would have taken, but they didn't, and they said, well, plan B for Blue, and now they've got somebody there to make sure that, I don't know, Lamar Miller doesn't get overworked in training camp, because as Dr. Gene has pointed out, that we don't have a good comp of a running back that has come back from an Achilles tear and returned to form truly. So they don't seem to be too worried about that. And Lamar Miller will still probably lead the team in receptions out of the backfield, may lead the team in rushing touchdowns because of the versatility he gives them in red zone sets. But I agree with you that Foreman, if he's ready, will take over the lion's share of carries, second half carries. And interestingly enough, I think that Houston was ahead of Jacksonville in Super Bowl odds that were early Super Bowl odds that were posted. So at least Vegas is looking at Houston as an equal of Jacksonville, roughly an equal of Jacksonville, which means this offense. Another thing I want to point out is when we're looking at projecting Houston's offense, we only saw it with 6 games of Deshaun Watson, and there's been a lot of buzz about Bill O'Brien really retooling the offense around what Watson can do, where they had to do it on the fly last year. So that's exciting.
I love it. He's going to get it now. Finally, he's going to understand. That was Rick Smith's pick.
Yeah.
The guy that got fired. And hopefully everything's going okay and with the wife's health and all that sort of things. But that was Rick Smith's pick. And Bill O'Brien didn't want Deshaun Watson because he was the decision maker, and now he's gone. So now Bill O'Brien, I did a whole rant on Pritchard and Cecil on the Fan about, man, we got to stop giving Bill O'Brien credit for anything. Like, I showed up and Tom Brady had 3 Super Bowls. I'm a genius. Yay. I'm Bill O'Brien. I'm unhinged. Come on, man. Now, Matt, I did want to stop ranting about Bill O'Brien. Get the blood pressure up. But let's rant about Deshaun Watson and just how that rushing quarterback can help those numbers for Foreman or Miller or whoever.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of it has to do with just the spread offense and embracing the college offenses that have been doing well in the league, and that's the ability to, spread the field. You have a lot of pre-snap motion that can move a linebacker or safety or force some shifts that put the trick the defense into playing a certain area or side of the field or a certain type of play, only to run something different that is counter to what they're expecting, or to open up a really quick hitting play in the passing game or the running game. A lot of that is set up with, what they kind of work together. You get those quick hitting passes and the screen passes, which is really a run game. The RPOs are really little more oftentimes as a variation of the run game, even if they count as passing sometimes, depending on where the pass arrives at the line of scrimmage. But when you look at, you look at how that works, it also sets up the ground game in terms of between the tackles and what they can do, because teams are now having to expect a guy like Kiki QT to take the ball and work it around one end or the other, or you can do a lot of things to set that up. I mean, when you look at the Chiefs and talk about how little they ran the ball, but when they're running wishbone with Travis Kelce getting the ball out of shotgun and having some, scoring touchdowns off of that, and making plays as a runner, or you're using plays where, it looks like they're gonna hand the ball off to Tyreek Hill like they did in the first quarter against the Patriots, or in the first half, only to let him run by. And now the team's so focused on Hill, you're watching Hunt work up the seam and beat Cassius Marsh for a long touchdown on Monday night, and everybody's losing their mind. And it's that type of game planning that maybe we look at the run game and talk about how it's not effective and how they shouldn't be running the ball anymore, and how they use these yards per rush or yards per play as an indicator, when sometimes we look at these stats. And I honestly think it doesn't account for, game theory or for adversarial process. When you're doing these types of studies, they should look at that in a little bit more, because what that's doing is if they were doing, the way that it's being studied and saying that running shouldn't matter, then, air raid would have taken over college football as the preeminent offense and the national championship caliber offense 10 years ago. And the NFL would have adopted it probably 5 years ago, and that's not happening. It's because quarterbacks still have to read the line of scrimmage and make good decisions in the pocket, and do a little bit more than what the air raid asks you to do, to win games at this level. And you still need that kind of talent at the quarterback position to execute. So, and the run game does provide balance. It does cause linebackers and defenses to play different alignments or shifts or different positions that maybe they're not counting or tracking, but maybe they should be on a level and multi-steps to show the influence of how a play, 3 plays from the first quarter of a game can influence, what happens later. And, that's just a more strategic point. So when I hear people railing about the run game, I think of that and think, well, it's incomplete information, and it's actually unintentionally dishonest information at times, because it's not really giving intellectual honesty to how the stats are being used. And so when you look at it from that standpoint, the run game is important. That's why they're trying to set it up in a variety of ways. They're just trying to create different variations to get outside and stretch the defense, and then be able to snap that defense in one direction and snap back in the other direction to throw it and create that in an opening. And the fact that Watson can also be a threat to keep that ball and run it, when there's a possibility of that player working to one side and then gashing them up the middle, it just creates another thing to account for, and another possibility for a defender to be fooled, which again creates an opening in the passing game or for another type of run. So you're constantly creating situations for defenses to overthink. And it only takes one play for the game to be basically broke wide open, or it's for the game to be over, because of that type of setup. So if you may have used 3 or 4 plays and none of them really were that big of an impact from a yardage standpoint, but they set up the one play at the end of the game that actually won it. And that's part of, just strategy. And again, things like adversarial process and game theory and incorporating that into when you're studying football and the context of the game as opposed to just looking at a data point.
That's why this game is so very fascinating. And I feel blessed as I wear a CU shirt to do a show every day with the MVP of a national championship team. And that's Mike Pritchard. And he said multiple times, triple option football's back. They're just throwing it instead of running it on the third option. Like triple option football's back. So it's a pendulum in the NFL. You have to be ready for it. But Bloom, a very interesting topic of conversation comes forward when you debate or discuss what's easier to do. Find one of the 3 elite quarterbacks, or let's say 5, if you want to be generous. There's 5 elite quarterbacks. Is that easier to do, or assemble 52 quality players around him? Because to me, the answer is assembling the 52. It's much, much harder to find one of those 3 or 5 guys. It's much easier to assemble quality talent and then have like a, Case Keenum run your show.
Right. Well, I'm glad you picked Case Keenum there, because I think what is going on now is we should start expecting offensive coordinators, Jared Goff, to bridge some of the gap. And in the case of Jared Goff, they're even in his ear as long as they can until the ball's snapped, like 15 seconds before the ball's snapped. So the answer, because we've talked a lot about this over the years on the show, there's not 32 starting quality NFL quarterbacks. And with so many quarterbacks in their mid-late 30s now, that could become a problem, especially if you look at the 2019 class. A lot is riding on this 2018 class. Also, we look at how the offensive schemes now. So one of the things I think we talked about a lot on over the draft weekend was big wide receivers are not in vogue anymore. They want separation, layup throws, high percentage throws. And again, this is all set mismatches. This is all set up by the offensive coordinator. This is all set up by the play design and getting the quarterbacks in tune with that. So I think you're absolutely right. And again, I would look to the Matt Waldman school that build a good team. And if it's easier, then that should incline you even more. Build a good team and then try to find that quarterback. And we're going to see the Giants who, and we don't think of Dave Gettleman as a forward-thinking coach, GM, but they took Kyle Lauletta, who I think was thought of as a quarterback that played with 4 different offensive coordinators, and a quarterback that of the second tier of quarterbacks in this class was more well-suited to be an extension of an offensive coordinator. So I think with these innovations and expectations, and we're going to watch Mitchell Trubisky and Matt Nagy, and we're going to watch Marcus Mariota and Matt LaFleur. And if they can have success of some of the coaches they've worked for in previous years, then I think that you got that idea of get your 52 and then get a functional quarterback. And Andy Dalton, a Case Keenum, who took Minnesota to the NFC title game last year, makes a lot of sense.
Try to build a team and get hot at the right time, Matt. And it seems like teams are realistically approaching this rather than be as desperate as some are, granted, but with the talented people were talking about quarterback going 1, 2, 3, 4 in the draft. And it wasn't outlandish to suggest that. It was interesting. It was a nice talking point. And they didn't, Allen fell, Rosen fell, Jackson was the last pick in the first round. So it seems like maybe some teams have maybe figured that out. Maybe.
Yeah, I'm hoping that the tide's changing. And I think that part of that idea of you build a strong team and then you find your quarterback, maybe part of it is that you find your quarterback, you build a strong team, and the quarterback you have, especially if he's a young quarterback, say Jared Goff, you let him develop and he might become an elite quarterback. Because that's the problem, is that we're even now as we're having this discussion, maybe it's because I've been sick the past 10 days and I'm just generally disagreeable. So as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking
contrary is what my
I'm just feeling kind of, I don't know, just feeling kind of grumpy right now. I think I'm getting Gene's grumpy old man thing going on right now. But to invoke grumpy Gene Bramwell into this conversation, since we haven't seen him in a while, is that I look at a guy like Goff and I think, yeah, sure, the coach was able to, at least for a limited amount of time, be able to help him out with certain reads. And certainly, yeah, they built a really strong team around him. But he also still shows some skills that if he, he shows those quiet feet, which is a very difficult thing to have. He shows pinpoint accuracy in some very difficult situations and skill to maneuver away from the pocket and deliver with really strong accuracy, which are difficult things to teach. And if you don't have a good line around a player like that, you can knock that out of them pretty quickly, and you can deteriorate that. And then it just reinforces the theory that the guy wasn't good after all. When in fact, what I think is happening is it's somewhere in between. Yes, the coach helped out a little bit with the pre-snap stuff, which is great, and that's a novel idea. Yes, the offensive line was terrific last year, and they revamped that with the receiving core with guys who, again, weren't with a bunch of slappies who just caught 50-50 balls and passed a metrics exam. So the fact that they could actually got skilled technicians outside and could use them to pair with a timing passer, and actually give him the time to do it. You saw a vast amount of improvement from a player. And I think it takes 2 to 3 years to get better. I mean, Kirk Cousins has been a top 5 quarterback last year, and he was a guy who looked like he was on career death's door, his first 2 to 3 years in the league. And I would argue that Jared Goff is a much better prospect than Kirk Cousins was. And I think that the fact that he went from the direction that he did, part of that is that he had the quality of team around him. So maybe teams are learning a couple things. You know what? There's like the Broncos. Maybe we do have our elite quarterback talent on our roster, but maybe we need to give him time to develop and let him develop behind a proven player. Maybe development means that we insert guys in and out of the lineup and have them sit behind a pro, a veteran who's played for multiple teams. I remember Drew Brees behind Doug Flutie. Nobody looked at Doug Flutie as a franchise quarterback. People were arguing it was an argument whether or not he should stay on the field when he was leading teams to the playoffs. But at the same time, to have that situation where you have multiple quarterbacks, some of them veterans, and you can intermittently use that player. And when you take him off the field because he screws up, you can put a good guy in, or at least a competent player in, and say, look, you screwed up. It's okay. We're not throwing you under the bus like Hugh Jackson did with Kaiser. We're not going to say, we're wondering if you're even any good at all. You're going to be like, you're our guy. And you screwed this up. You need to sit for a little bit and figure some things out, because if you don't, you're going to start getting into bad emotional habits and have kind of I don't know how to put it in a way that's almost kind of like you kind of have some, and I don't know how to say this in a way that's going to sound good. So all I'll say is that maybe some sort of stress based on what you've seen with dealing with a performance-related situation. So maybe it's kind of a performance-related stress.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, you're describing performance-related stress.
I'm
not talking about any sort of trauma, but it's just
right.
being able to deal with that. And what I always say is the best athletes out there perform at the highest levels with a calm mind.
Yeah. John,
calm your mind first and foremost through usually forecasting or like meditating or projecting, like this is what I'm going to do in this situation. And it sounds maybe, but when you look at all habits are from a physiological standpoint is your synapses get used to doing the same thing. They get used to firing the same way, and they actually grow together.
Yeah, and if you start
wire together
in a bad situation like that, they start to grow in a bad way with bad habits. So if you can take them out and not have to work them through that, then you may be able to halt that from happening. John Smoltz went through a lot of bad stuff as a pitcher for the Atlanta Braves early in his career, and saw a sports psychologist, and ended up becoming a terrific pitcher. And he was a great talent coming out. And that'll probably be the only baseball reference I ever give on a show.
I was going to say, Blue, who is that?
Right? But it's at the same time, that's the kind of, Bloom doesn't want to know.
I don't want to talk about John Smoltz. The Pirates are in first place right now. I just want to say that for posterity.
Yeah. So, but at the same time, that's the kind of thing that if you have that ability to intermittently use a guy and remove him from a situation before he gets into emotional quicksand, that may be a good thing. And I'm hoping that's the next step that teams take, to say multiple quarterbacks on the roster. We build the talent around and we get a good line. We don't just throw the guy in there. Because, I mean, the Bills with Josh Allen, they lost 3 offensive linemen. Who did they put in their place? I don't know anybody who they put in their place that anyone's remarking that they're competent or good at this stage.
Composure. That's the biggest problem with Josh Allen.
Yeah, and now he's going to get thrust into that.
Everyone just talks about the accuracy. Oh my God, accuracy. It's his composure. Why did passes sail over the moon? Because he's doing this.
Yeah.
Anytime, he doesn't even have to be pressured. And Allen has a bad habit of like, whoa, hey, I saw a defender. I saw something flash through. Whoa. So like, that's the biggest problem for him to overcome.
And as much of the potential that he does have, and I think Bloom did a fair job of talking about that. I've certainly shown some game tape to show what he can do that some people say he can't. But that in mind, if you don't have the surrounding talent to protect you and set you up so that you are consistently displaying good habits, then the bad habits are going to get exacerbated. So yeah, I think it's a great step with some of these teams, but we need to see more of it, because I think the biggest problem we're having is that there were a number of quarterbacks who could have grown into elite players who didn't. Because if you're telling me that Tom Brady, would have been an elite player in the Houston Texans line of the David Carr days, I'm not sure that I would agree with you on that. I'm not sure I would agree with you if he were in Jacksonville during the early Blake Bortles days, whether or not he would be an elite quarterback. He might be better than those guys, but I'm not sure we would have been talking about him in the same way.
Everything is repetition. If you want to be better, Bloom, I actually have the first episode of the Audible on the iTunes whenever I go to edit these shows. So every single show, the first one shows up right next to the new show. And if I want to, I can go back and listen to it. And it's pretty bad. Yeah. In our fledgling days, but y'all were there and y'all stayed and we've grown this audience and we've gotten better at doing this. Why? It's repetition. It's all about the reps. Case Keenum took a virtual reality system in Minnesota and used that to help aid himself in a situation where they never named him the starter. Even before the NFC Championship game where they got waxed by the Eagles, they never came out and said, he's our starter. It was always kind of a go situation with that. And he took it upon himself to use technology to get more mental reps. That's what it's about, Bloom.
Yeah, confidence. We've been talking about this. Go back to guys like Ryan Moats, where if confidence isn't there, then it can fall apart. Josh Freeman, I think, is a good example of a player who had looked so promising at the beginning of his career. And Josh Freeman may end up being a good comparison for Josh Allen in some ways, at least of what we saw before the draft, and hopefully yes at the beginning, but not afterwards for Allen. So confidence is massive, but Nick Foles and Doug Peterson, or Carson Wentz and Doug Peterson, it's a two-way street. If your coach is confident in you and calls plays and trusts you, then you're more likely to be confident in yourself. And I do think that something that Matt has alluded to, something that I know you've talked about Mike Shanahan and other coaches that aren't necessarily, I know Hugh Jackson has been mentioned more than once, not just tonight, but over the course of the last year with Deshaun Kaiser. Some coaches are doing their part to undermine. Just mentioned in the chat room with Wendell about Sony Michel, that already Ivan fears like, well, if he fumbles, he's going to sit on the bench. Why? Why do you want to start already putting that idea in a player's head? Because I think in a lot of things in life, whatever we visualize, what you think about, you bring about, right, Cease? And if
synapses that fire together, wire together.
Yeah, it's just all we're freestyling now. It's dropping science. And I think that we see this play out, and that's one of the things that was so comforting and reassuring and refreshing about the Eagles winning in the name of love and mutual trust and togetherness. And I don't remember which one of the Eagles said, I'd rather win one title feeling the way we feel, having the fun that we have, than 5 miserable with you throwing some shade at Belichick's Patriots. And we'll see whether that can spread the love and the trust, because if it encourages confidence in players, and as Matt was saying, this idea that it's okay if you make a mistake, it's okay if it takes you a little while to get rolling, because that's all part of the plan.
I had a chance to chat up Rich Gannon a little bit, and it was all about, I finally found a team that believed in me. That was, hey, Rich Gannon, how'd you do it? I finally found someone that believed in me. So it is that two-way street. And Bloom, here's another one. Energy flows where attention goes. We all have that friend. And there's a guy I've known for a long, long time. I actually haven't talked to him in a while because it's too depressing to talk to him, honestly. But hey, how's it going, man? It sucks. My life sucks. Yeah, if you think it sucks, it's going to suck. If you think you can do it, you can pull yourself out of it. So I firmly believe in that, in a direction in football and in life that, it'd be nice to see more teams go. And knowing a little bit behind the scenes about Matt LaFleur, you just brought up his name, Bloom, and my heart went pitter patter. I'm like, don't screw it up, LaFleur, because that could be our next, great head coach. We'll see. Are you excited about it with Mariota, Bloom?
I am, and I like what Mike Vrabel was saying too it's about touchdowns. I like the pieces they have assembled. Some names that we might get to know better this year, like Johnny Smith and Taywan Taylor. They have an offensive line, obviously, and we talked about this going all the way back to the pre-draft evaluation of Mariota, that he is somewhat robotic, which can be negative or positive depending on what you ask him to do. And I'm excited to see what LaFleur is going to do, because he's gotten the Kyle Shanahan genes now. He's got the Sean McVay genes from last year, and it gives me an opportunity to also say kudos to McVay for letting him have this opportunity to be a play caller and advance his career another step towards being that next great head coach, instead of keeping him out of selfish reasons.
It is the Audible Live each and every Thursday night right here at footballguys.com. Make sure to check out our free daily newsletter going on right now at footballguys.com. Sign up, and hey, you've got a life. We don't. We're going to send you the best information from around the National Football League with our opinions and takes. And of course, Bloom, lots of great stuff going on at Football Guys, as there's never an off season.
No, never. And the team pages are starting to roll out now. Lots of great information, player pages, just that overview to set you up going into training camp. All those questions like we started talking about at the beginning of the show. And I'm excited for some of the things that are emerging as I'm taking a closer look at some of these running back numbers and things that surprise me. So I'm sure they're going to surprise at least a few of you.
And I can't wait for the next round of when OTAs start in less than a week. And I just can't wait to see what happens, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm looking forward to contributing to Football Guys as well, in terms of, getting the gut check rolling back up. And I think one of the columns I'm going to start with is, I think people are I've noticed a lot of talk about the Raiders and John Gruden and how boneheaded they are and what they're doing. And I'm starting to think that maybe there's a contrarian look at that is worthwhile to examine, because usually it is the league team that goes in the opposite direction of that, of what the trend is, that tends to do fairly well. And I think that there are a lot of examples on that team that could be really good surprises for fantasy owners. So stay tuned for that. Grumpy
Matt Waldman will break out those claws every now and again, Matt. Every now and again. You got to lay down the thunder, right? The law.
Well, it's got to be cathartic. I think that's all it is getting all the bad out, so.
There we have it. That's a wrap for tonight's program, everyone. Thank you very much for watching on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/footballguys.com. And thank you very much for listening and subscribing to the Audible on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, however you listen to our podcast. We appreciate you and thank you. So for the great Matt Waldman and the fantastic Sigmund Bloom, I'm Cecil Lammey saying stay tuned and stay frosty.